Okay, let's talk about ignorance of the law. I was just watching a video on social media where cops tried to stop someone from recording them, telling them that it's against the law to record police officers, while they're conducting their business, which is not true. Anything in public, is not set for private, public use. Okay, so he usually, when I've helped people in criminal cases, specifically with no probable cause hearings or preliminary hearings, they would find that the officer made an illegal arrest and cite no probable cause, but not cite the officer for illegal arrest, and using his ignorance of the law as an excuse to making this mistake. And I've always found it objectionable that, they hire people to enforce the law that don't know the laws, you know, specifically Pearson versus Ray. It is a Supreme Court decision back in '67. They let the cops go because they didn't know the sign on the wall wasn't actually a law. Well, let's get into ignorance of the law. Ignorance of law is a legal principle, meaning that not knowing a law is illegal is not a valid defense against prosecution. It assumes citizens are responsible for knowing the law, preventing individuals from escaping liability simply by claiming unawareness, which generally absolute. Minor exceptions exist for specific intent and crimes. Okay, no excuse is not a valid defense in criminal cases to claim you did not know your actions were illegal. Legal maximum. The concept is rooted in Roman law and applied in modern legal systems to encourage familiarity with the laws. It says so in the Rules of Professional Conduct in the preamble that they are encouraged to teach and induce public participation. You'd have to go over the preamble of the Rule of Professional Conduct to understand that. Applicability applies to most laws, particularly those designed to prevent harm such as theft, murder, and arson. Exceptions to this rule, while rare, ignorance of the law can sometimes be defense if the statute specifically requires a defendant knew that they were violating law, the person relied on or can prove misleading information from a public official, which public officials will do that and tell you something's legal when it's actually not. So I always refer to the books, to the law. A new law was passed that was not sufficiently publicized. Exception, legal context, mitigation. Although it might not absolve someone, ignorance can sometimes serve as mitigating factor in sentencing or reduce civil damages. Specific intent cases where law requires prosecution to prove the defendant specifically intended to commit a crime, a genuine mistake of law might be relevant. Complex regulations. Okay, ultimately, the law holds that individuals are accountable for their actions regardless of their knowledge of the legal code, making it crucial to understand legal obligations. Okay, somebody criticized me for, using AI, but I use all. Sometimes I refer to the AI because it gives you a synopsis of something I did before AI. Sorry, I would explain stuff to people, read it to them, go over it. So that's what AI is doing here, giving you a general idea, and every example it could possibly come up with for ignorance of the law. A legal principle holding a person who is unaware of a law may not escape liability for violating that law merely by being aware of its content. People may ask, what does ignorance of the law mean? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Is a legal principle meaning a person cannot escape criminal civil liability. Citizens are presumed to know that the law making this a foundation through rarely excuse rule, fundamental rights. You cannot argue you didn't know an act was illegal to avoid punishment, even if you truly did not know. Application, it applies to all citizens, meaning not knowing the speed limit, tax regulations, or a license requirement does not invalidate a fine or a charge. Example, a business owner cannot avoid fines for lacking a required permit by claiming they didn't know the permit was necessary. A driver cannot avoid a speeding ticket by claiming ignorance of the posted limit. Why this rule exists. If ignorance were a valid defense, offenders could easily avoid conviction by claiming they are unaware of the law, which would undermine the entire justice system, says this New Jersey State Bar Foundation article. Encourages citizens to be informed of their legal obligations. And that's what I've been doing through all my posts. They will hold you to this term, ignorance of the law. And it'll tell you it's no excuse. Unless, of course, it's your public servants. They know the law, but they will pretend like they don't. That's why I keep telling people, when you go to court, when you see a lawyer, when you want legal advice, first refer to the rules of professional conduct. So when you talk to an attorney and they aren't revealing this to you, they don't divulge their legal obligations to you as your employee, that's deprivation of rights. And if you don't know the rules of professional conduct and you hire them, they're not going to tell you about it. They're not going to tell you about their legal obligations, and they will act ignorant of the law. That's why so many of you are in the position you're in, because you're ignorant of the law. You're a lawyer not discussing, reviewing the legal obligations of all lawyers and judges in every court of law. The rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct is deprivation of rights under the color of law. That's a federal crime. And considering the fact that the opposing party, the judge, doesn't cite your attorney for violating any of these rules, because mandatory reporting misconduct. It's mandatory to report misconduct. Misconduct is violating any of the rules of the codes. Any violation of the rules of the codes, it's mandatory to report those violations. Nobody does that, which unequivocally proves a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. So your ignorance of the law is what they're using against you. Okay? You don't know a lot of these laws I talk about, especially what I just went over right now. And they will hold you to it, lock you up for it. You didn't know. They knew, but they didn't tell you. You literally, quite literally, I've seen these folks that are fighting for their kids, and they're taking it to state Supreme Courts. Some, I think, were taking it to federal courts, and they were saying, hey, look we're learning. We have to actually learn all this to compete against all these lawyers and judges. We're quite literally learning to become lawyers. And I've been telling people that since the 80s. The only way you'll ever achieve effective assistance of counsel, get a fair trial, make sure that due process happens, is if you take the rules and the codes with you and review them in the court of law with the judges and lawyers to make sure everything's on the up and up. And don't forget a quick and speedy trial. The mandatories for that, especially in a criminal case. It's required in all cases. If you read the rules of professional conduct, expediting litigation is mandatory. It would be diligent. It would be competent. And to communicate why it wasn't is mandatory. Okay, so there's a few laws I threw at you from the rules of professional conduct. It isn't happening. So people, please go over these videos I made for you. I don't charge anything. I don't ask anybody to join. I'm not looking for followers. I'm looking for leaders. People, I'm getting old and I'm getting tired. Doing this for a very long time. So I need somebody to pick up the torch, you know. I just don't feel like I got that long to go, and I know this ain't gonna happen. So I need more people in on this. Just review all my posts and you'll find out that your ignorance of the law is what got you where you're at. They're ignoring the law, added to that. And they're ignoring the law. You know, the rule of law doesn't exist. You know, I've seen some states are trying to remove the writ of habeas corpus, but the Constitution, federal law guarantees that, and any law repugnant to the United States Constitution is null and void, cannot exist. I don't even know why anybody would consider that when you took the oath to support and defend the Constitution. And taking that oath, you know, leaves you no reservation or, you know, ability to change that. You cannot change that. You cannot take the oath, step into office, and say, I don't like the Constitution, so I'm going to change it. And then say this or that. Any decimation would be a desecration and a defecation on our United States Constitution. That's violating the oath. You're living under the color of law, which is against the law. You know, you're living in a corporacy, and you know it. You know, corporations are paying your politicians to do their bidding, which is not in the public interest because that's what voting is all about. And you could use the basic obligations, public service, to get all this to stop. I've been trying. I've talked to politicians on and off for years, since the 80s. And I always get ignored. Look up the basic obligations of public service. All right. Thank you and good night. I just wanted you to know ignorance of the law is no excuse. It'll be used against you. It's been used against me from time to time. But when I use it on them, and I have on multiple occasions, things seem to go my way. But that's because not only do I know the laws they're breaking, but I know the penalties of those laws that they break. You know what? And they break every law there is. Every law I ever mentioned. You look over all my videos and you'll find that I'm just talking about what should be happening that isn't, and what shouldn't be happening that is. Don't let your ignorance of the law be your downfall. It's up to you. I started very young knowing that, you know, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, which can be any day, every day of your life. All right, people, I wish you nothing but a long life and good health. May your Creator always be with you and rain many blessings. Thank you and good night. Please don't let your ignorance of the law be used against you.